Have you ever pulled up to a red light and found yourself staring at a truck so big, so shiny, so aggressively loaded with chrome and LED lighting that you genuinely wondered if a rapper lived in your neighborhood? I'm talking about the kind of truck with a back seat that fits 6 adults, a touchscreen the size of a flat-screen TV, and a payment that, and I need you to really hear this, that payment is probably bigger than your rent check. And here's what really messes with me. The guy behind the wheel? He's not a hedge fund manager. He's not a tech bro with stock options. He's a regular person. Maybe he's a contractor. Maybe he's in sales. Maybe he works at the same company you do. And somehow he's pulling off an $1,100 a month car payment while complaining that gas prices are too high. So what's actually going on here? How are regular people affording vehicles that cost more than some houses? My name is Rick, and today I'm going to show you exactly how this works. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you're going to see every car dealership you walk into very, very differently. Let me start with some numbers that are going to sound completely made up. The average new car payment in America has now crossed $730 a month. Not for a BMW, not for a Range Rover. That's the average across all new vehicles sold nationwide. Now, trucks and SUVs, which make up over 80% of new vehicles sold, those payments routinely hit $900, $1,000, sometimes $1,200 a month. And people are locking into these payments for 6, 7, sometimes 8 years. Think about what 8 years means. 8 years ago, the iPhone 7 was new. People were debating whether to upgrade. 8 years from now, whatever car you're financing today is going to feel like a museum piece, and you'll still be making payments on it. Now you might say, Rick, maybe people are just making more money. Wages have gone up, right? Sure, but nowhere near enough to justify this using any traditional logic. The old rule said your car payment shouldn't exceed 10 to 15% of your gross income for long-term stability. By that math, a $1,200 payment requires you to be pulling in 6 figures, but people making 50 or 60 grand a year are signing these loans every single day. So what's actually happening? Let's start with the most obvious trick, one that's hiding in plain sight on every loan document, the loan term. Not long ago, a car loan was 3 years, maybe 4 if you really needed to stretch. Those loans are essentially extinct now. Today, 6-year loans are standard, 7-year loans feel normal, and 8-year loans, 96 monthly payments are spreading fast. Some lenders are even starting to push 10-year car loans, which is genuinely one of the most terrifying sentences I've ever had to say out loud. Here's why this works so well on buyers. Take a $60,000 truck. On a 4-year loan, you're looking at a payment around $1,400 a month. That number makes most people visibly uncomfortable. It should. But stretch that same loan to 8 years, suddenly the payment drops to around $850. And $850 sounds manageable. It sounds like something you could maybe make work. The dealer knows this. The dealer is counting on this. They're not selling you a truck. They're selling you that $850 number. But here's the math they're hoping you never sit down and do yourself. At 4 years, you pay roughly $67,000 total. At 8 years, you're past $81,000. That's over $14,000 extra, paid for nothing except the luxury of a lower monthly number. And that's before we even talk about interest. And it gets worse. Cars depreciate fast, brutally fast. Most new vehicles lose 40 to 50% of their value in the first 3 years. So by year 4 or 5 of your 8-year loan, you almost certainly owe more than the car is worth. You're what they call upside down or underwater. And at that point, you can't sell the car. You can't trade it in without bringing a check just to close out the loan. You're trapped. Okay, so now let's talk about those 0% financing offers that dealers plaster everywhere. 0% APR for qualified buyers. Free money. No interest. Sounds incredible, right? Here's the truth about 0% financing that the industry really, truly does not want you to understand. There is no free money in a car dealership. There has never been free money in a car dealership. When a manufacturer offers 0% financing, they're not being generous. That interest cost is already baked into the price of the vehicle. Here's how it actually works. The manufacturer can either cut $4,000 or $5,000 off the price of the truck, or they can offer you 0% financing. Both options cost them roughly the same amount of money, but 0% financing feels better. It feels like you're winning, so that's what they advertise. You're not getting both, you're getting one or the other. And depending on your situation, the cash discount might actually be the smarter move, but you'll never know because you walked in hypnotized by that big 0% sign in the window. And here's the other thing about 0% offers. They usually come with strict requirements: great credit, limited price negotiation, and shorter loan terms, which pushes your monthly payment back to the uncomfortable number. The people who actually qualify and benefit from 0% financing are typically the same people who could have just paid cash for the car anyway. For the rest of us, the interest rate on these extended loans can be brutal. Now we get to what I think is the most insidious part of this entire system. I call it the Trade-In Treadmill, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Here's how it goes. Someone buys a new SUV on a 7-year loan. 3 or 4 years in, they're bored. Maybe a newer model came out. Maybe their needs changed. Maybe they just want something different. But here's the problem. They're still underwater on the loan. They owe more than the car is worth. So what does the dealer do? They offer a solution. They'll roll that negative equity right into the next loan. Let's say you owe $30,000 on your current car, but it's only worth $22,000. That's $8,000 in negative equity. That $8,000 doesn't disappear. It gets quietly added to the price of your next vehicle. So instead of financing a $50,000 truck, you're now financing $58,000. And most buyers barely notice the difference because they're focused on the monthly payment number, not the total loan balance. Now, payments climb higher. Loan terms stretch longer, and you start the new deal even more underwater than the last one. Fast forward another 3 years, same cycle, except the hole is deeper. I've seen people making car payments for 15 straight years, rolling so much negative equity forward that they're financing $70,000 vehicles worth $40,000. They're paying for 2 or 3 cars they no longer own, while taking on debt for a new one. And the dealer loves this. A customer in the Trade-In Treadmill is a customer for life, because the only way off the treadmill requires writing a check for thousands of dollars that most people simply don't have sitting around. So they keep going, keep trading, keep rolling debt forward, and they mistake movement for progress. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, Rick, this all makes sense mathematically, but why do smart people keep walking into this? Why do people who know better still sign these loans? And the answer isn't math. It's psychology. Specifically, it's billions of dollars in psychology that the automotive industry has spent decades perfecting. Somewhere along the way, vehicles stopped being transportation and became identity. Your truck isn't just moving you from point A to point B anymore. It's telling the world who you are. It signals success, capability, status, reliability, the kind of person who has their life together. And the marketing that supports this is incredibly sophisticated. That commercial you saw last Sunday, the rugged truck hauling equipment through mud, climbing a mountain, towing a boat into a lake at sunrise, that commercial wasn't made for contractors. It was made for office workers who spend 47 hours a week in a cubicle and want to feel like they don't. The hardest terrain most of those trucks will ever see is a speed bump in a Target park, but the fantasy is so well constructed, so emotionally resonant that by the time you walk into the dealership, you're not buying transportation anymore. You're buying a version of yourself. And that's a very different purchase decision. When you're buying identity, a $950 monthly payment stops feeling like debt. It starts feeling like self-investment. People tell themselves, I work hard. I deserve something nice. I'm not going to drive around in a beat-up old car. And I understand that feeling. I genuinely do. But here's what almost nobody stops to count: what that feeling actually costs them. Let's run the real numbers that most people never bother to calculate. And I mean all the numbers, not just a sticker price. Take a $60,000 truck financed over 7 years at 7% interest. Your monthly payment comes out to around $875. Over the life of the loan, you'll pay roughly $73,500 just to own the vehicle, already more than $60,000. But okay, that's how loans work. Now add insurance. On an expensive truck, you're looking at $250 a month minimum once you factor in comprehensive, collision, and gap coverage. That's another $21,000 over 7 years. Fuel. If you're driving a truck that gets 15 miles per gallon in real-world conditions, and most don't do much better than that, you're spending around $350 a month on gas, another $29,000 over 7 years. Maintenance and repairs. Modern trucks are incredibly complex machines. A basic brake job can run $1,000. Transmission problems hit $4,000 to $6,000. Major engine work? You don't want to know. Conservatively, add another $12,000 to $15,000 over 7 years. Add it all up, over 7 years, you're spending over $135,000 on that truck. And at the end of those 7 years, if you're lucky, if the market is good and the truck held up, it's worth maybe $18,000. You spent $135,000 to own an $18,000 truck. That's not transportation. That's wealth destruction with leather seats and a backup camera. Now here's the part that actually keeps me up at night. Take that same $875 a month and instead of handing it to a lender, you invest it in a basic S&P 500 index fund. After 7 years, at a conservative 10% annual return, you'd have roughly $90,000. You wouldn't just have avoided a debt burden, you would have actively built real wealth. That's the opportunity cost nobody talks about in the showroom. So how are people actually pulling this off month to month? Because even with everything we've talked about, even with the extended terms and the psychological hooks, $900 a month is still a lot of money for most households. So what gives? The honest answer is financial gymnastics. And none of these moves are good news. Some people restructure their entire lives around the payment. They move into smaller apartments, stay with roommates longer than planned, skip vacations, stop going out to eat, all so they can protect that truck payment. They'll eat lunch at their desk every day while driving to work in a vehicle that costs more than some people's annual salary. Some people take second jobs specifically to cover the vehicle. They drive for rideshare on weekends, using that expensive truck to generate just enough income to make the payment on that same expensive truck. I genuinely don't know how to describe that other than automotive indentured servitude. Others start putting maintenance costs, insurance, and fuel on credit cards to free up cash for the monthly payment. So they're covering a high payment by taking on high interest debt, like fighting a fire with lighter fluid. Technically, you're doing something, but the situation is getting worse. And then there's the most painful version. People taking out personal loans or even loans against their home equity to make a down payment or cover the negative equity from their last vehicle. They're leveraging the one asset that should be building wealth to fund an asset that's actively losing value. The math on that is brutal, and it doesn't get better over time. And here's where the whole thing starts to show its cracks. We're already seeing the warning signs. Auto loan delinquencies are rising. Repossessions are climbing. More people are missing payments as inflation eats through budgets that were already stretched thin. When someone defaults, the consequences don't stay small. The car gets repossessed. Credit score collapses. And here's the part most people don't realize. Even after the car is gone, many still owe money because the auction price doesn't cover what's left on the loan. That deficiency balance follows them, sometimes for years. And zooming out from individual cases, Americans collectively owe over $1.6 trillion in auto loan debt. Trillion. A significant chunk of that sits in long-term underwater loans. Some economists are watching this closely as a potential consumer debt crisis in waiting. It may not crash the economy the way 2008 did, but for millions of individual families, the pain could be very real, very lasting, and very avoidable. Okay, I don't want to just leave you staring into the financial abyss here. Let's talk about what doing this right actually looks like. And I want to be clear, this isn't about driving a rusted-out 2003 Civic with no AC for the rest of your life. It's about being intentional. First, seriously consider buying used. A 3 or 4-year-old vehicle has already taken the worst of the depreciation hit. You often get 90% of the vehicle for 60% of the price. That math works in your favor for once. Second, if you do buy new, buy less car than you're approved for. I cannot stress this enough. Getting approved for $70,000 is not a recommendation, it's a credit limit. The dealer's job is to max it out. Your job is to use it as a ceiling you stay well below. Third, make a real down payment and choose the shortest loan term you can actually handle. This goes against everything the dealership incentivizes, but shorter terms save you tens of thousands and dramatically reduce your risk of going underwater. Fourth, stop focusing on the monthly payment and start calculating the total cost of ownership. Payments, insurance, fuel, maintenance, depreciation, add it all up over 5 years. That number tells you the real story. It's almost always more uncomfortable than the monthly payment made it seem. And fifth, this is the big one, disconnect your self-worth from what you drive. Your car is a tool. It moves you through the world. It is not a statement about who you are as a person, no matter how many billions of dollars the auto industry has spent trying to convince you otherwise. The fastest your identity can separate from your vehicle, the faster you start making rational decisions about one of the biggest recurring costs in your life. Look, if you can genuinely afford a $1,200 truck payment without it derailing your savings, your emergency fund, your retirement, your goals, more power to you. Enjoy the truck. I mean that. But for most people, these extreme car payments are quietly doing massive damage. They're trading future security for present status. They're giving up what actually matters: financial freedom, flexibility, peace of mind, for a depreciating asset that's worth a fraction of what they paid within just a few years. The industry built a system that makes impossible payments look possible by keeping your eyes on the monthly number while hiding the total cost, the total risk, and the total consequences. They turn psychology into sales tactics, and it works. But now you know how the trick works, and the next time you're sitting across from a finance manager at a dealership, you'll be watching for all of it. If this video helped, share it with someone who's about to buy a car. It might save them from a decision that follows them for the next decade. Hit subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.